I'm Juliet Vance, 34 female. For the last decade, my life has been a whirlwind of scorching hot pans, endless prep lists, and the intoxicating dream of opening my own restaurant. I finally did it, creating a beautiful space called The Hearth, right here in my hometown. But what happens when the family you built your dreams to impress decides your biggest moment isn't worth their time? Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. For as long as I can remember, my life has been measured in flavors and temperatures. While other kids were playing with dolls, I was shadowing my grandmother in the kitchen, learning the subtle alchemy of turning simple ingredients into memories. My dream was never to be just a cook. It was to be a creator of experiences, a host to the community. I wanted to build a place where every meal felt like a welcome home. That dream became The Hearth, a name I chose because it signified warmth, comfort, and the very center of a home. It took everything I had to bring it to life. I poured my entire savings, every last cent I'd squirreled away from years of working double shifts in other people's kitchens, into this venture. I took out a small business loan that felt like an anchor around my neck, a constant reminder of the risk I was taking. The space I found was a derelict brick building that had been empty for years, a forgotten corner of downtown that most people overlooked. But I saw the potential beneath the dust and decay. I saw the beautiful exposed brick, the high ceilings with their timber beams, and the large windows that could flood the room with natural light. I spent 6 months doing most of the renovation work myself, alongside a couple of trusted friends who believed in my vision. I learned how to sand floors until my hands were raw, how to plaster walls until my arms ached, and how to wire light fixtures by watching endless tutorials online. Every single detail was a piece of me. I chose the deep navy blue for the walls, the warm reclaimed wood for the tables, and the soft, ambient lighting that made everyone look and feel their best. I even designed the menu cards myself, practicing my calligraphy for weeks until each letter was perfect. The menu itself was a love letter to my roots, modern American cuisine with a touch of the rustic, comforting food my grandmother taught me to make. As the grand opening approached, my excitement was a nervous, fluttering thing in my chest. This wasn't just about a business, it was about validation. It was about proving to my family that my artsy hobby was a viable career, a legitimate success. My family's support structure had always been a bit lopsided. My younger brother, Ezra, was the golden child. He had a stable, predictable marketing job at a large corporation, a clear trajectory that my parents, especially my father, understood and admired. His promotions were celebrated with grand dinners, his corporate jargon was repeated with reverence at family gatherings, and his path was always seen as the right one. My path, on the other hand, was seen as a charming but ultimately frivolous detour. The artsy one, my father would call me, a label that felt both affectionate and deeply dismissive. When I announced I was leaving a steady head chef position to open my own place, their reactions were lukewarm at best. My mother, Carol, fretted about the financial risk. "Are you sure about this, honey? It's so unstable," she'd say, her brow furrowed with concern that felt more like doubt. My father, Robert, a retired businessman, immediately saw it in terms of profit and loss. He peppered me with questions about my business plan, my projected revenue, and my exit strategy, never once asking about the food, the concept, or the passion driving me. It felt less like support and more like an audit. Despite their skepticism, a part of me, the naive, hopeful part, believed that seeing the hearth in person would change everything. Once they saw the tangible result of my labor, the gleaming kitchen, the beautifully set tables, the incredible staff I'd hired, they would finally understand. They would finally be proud. I sent out the invitations a month in advance. Not just a text, but thick, cream-colored cardstock invitations, the same ones I sent to local food critics and investors. I hand-delivered one to my parents' house and gave one directly to Ezra. I followed up with calls and texts, sharing photos of the finished dining room, the new sign being hung, the first successful test run of the kitchen. I wanted them to feel a part of it. My mom's favorite lemon tart was the star of the dessert menu. I even curated a playlist of songs from our childhood, tunes we'd all sung along to on long family road trips. Every detail was a bridge I was building toward them, an invitation not just to a restaurant opening, but back into my world. Ezra had texted a few days prior, "So excited for you, Jules. Big week for the Vance family." I held onto that text like a promise. He mentioned he was also having a small get-together at his place that same night to celebrate a recent promotion, but he assured me it was super casual, just a backyard thing, and that they'd all be at the restaurant first for the main event, the grand opening. He made it sound like his party was the after party, a casual wind-down after celebrating my monumental achievement. I chose to believe him. I wanted to believe him. So, I prepared. I prepped enough food for a full house, chilled dozens of bottles of champagne, and instructed my staff to reserve the best table in the house. A cozy, rounded booth in the corner with a perfect view of the entire dining room for my family. As the clock ticked towards 7 p.m. on opening night, I smoothed the front of my crisp white chef's coat, took a deep, calming breath, and stood ready to welcome the people who were supposed to be my biggest fans. The restaurant was perfect. The stage was set. I was ready for my dream to begin, and I was certain they would be there to see it. The first hour of the grand opening was a blur of controlled chaos and adrenaline. Other guests started to arrive. Friends I'd made in the industry, my small group of loyal supporters, and a few curious locals who had watched the renovations with interest. The dining room, which had been silent and still moments before, began to fill with a low, happy hum of conversation and the clinking of glasses. My staff moved with a practiced grace I'd instilled in them over weeks of training. Orders were flowing into the kitchen, and the first plates were making their way out to the tables, each one a small work of art. Everything was running exactly as I had planned, exactly as I had dreamed. But every time the front door opened, my head would snap up, a hopeful jolt running through me, only to be met with the faces of strangers. The large corner booth, our reserved family table, remained conspicuously empty. At 7:30 p.m., I sent a quick text to the family group chat. "Things are getting busy in here. Can't wait to see you all." I added a smiling emoji, trying to project a breezy confidence I didn't feel. I stared at my phone for a few minutes, but the message remained on delivered. No response. I told myself they were probably just running late, stuck in traffic, or coordinating their arrival. My family was never known for their punctuality. I pushed the growing unease to the back of my mind and focused on the kitchen, calling out orders and inspecting plates. But the unease was a persistent weed, its roots digging deeper with each passing minute. By 8:30 p.m., the restaurant was packed. Every table except for one was occupied. Laughter and lively chatter filled the space I had so painstakingly created. People were raving about the food, complimenting the ambience and promising to return. By all accounts, the night was a resounding success, but for me, it felt hollow. The joy was muted, tainted by the glaring emptiness of that one table. It was like a missing tooth in a beautiful smile, the only thing I could focus on. I pulled out my phone again, still no response to my text. I tried calling my mom's cell. It went straight to voicemail. I called my dad. Same result. A cold knot of dread began to tighten in my stomach. They wouldn't just not show up. They wouldn't. It was my hostess, a sweet young woman named Maya, who delivered the final, unintentional blow. She approached me hesitantly around 9:15 p.m., her phone in her hand. "Chef," she said quietly, "I think your brother's Instagram is set to public. Someone tagged him in a story." She showed me the screen, and the world tilted on its axis. The image was bright and chaotic, a stark contrast to the sophisticated calm of my dining room. It was a video, shaky and loud, of a backyard party. Plastic chairs were scattered across a patchy lawn, and a cooler of cheap beer sat open in the corner. In the center of it all was my brother, Ezra, being hoisted onto someone's shoulders. The caption, written in a bubbly, obnoxious font, read, "Promotion party vibes, congrats Ezra." And there in the background was my entire family. My dad was grilling burgers, laughing heartily. My mom was holding a paper plate, chatting with my aunt. Cousins, uncles, they were all there. someone brought out a sheet cake and the crowd started singing. Across the top of the cake, in sloppy blue icing, were the words, "To bigger things." I felt the air leave my lungs. They didn't just miss my opening. They chose not to come. They had collectively decided that Ezra's predictable step up the corporate ladder was more significant than the culmination of my entire life's work. His backyard barbecue with lukewarm beer trumped my grand opening, the one I had poured my blood, sweat, and soul into. They weren't running late. They had never planned to come at all. The playlist I'd so carefully curated, the one filled with songs that reminded me of them, was still playing softly over the speakers, a cruel mockery of a connection that apparently only I valued. The lemon tart, my mother's favorite, sat untouched in the dessert display. The rest of the night passed in a fog. I moved on autopilot, smiling at guests, thanking them for coming and overseeing the kitchen, but my mind was miles away, stuck on that looping Instagram video. The laughter, the cake, the casual, celebratory atmosphere, it was a party for my replacement, a celebration of the child who had followed the rules. I was the outlier, and they had closed ranks without me. When the last guests finally departed, the silence of the dining room was deafening. My staff, sensing my mood, cleaned up quietly and efficiently before wishing me a subdued good night. I was left alone in my beautiful, successful, empty restaurant. I walked through the room, wiping down tables that my family would never sit at, folding napkins they would never use. The smell of garlic and rosemary, once so comforting, now seemed to cling to the air with a cloying sadness. Just as I was about to lock up, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my dad. My heart gave a foolish little leap of hope, thinking it might be an apology, an explanation, anything. But the message was short and clinical. "We need to discuss the restaurant. No congratulations, no sorry we missed it." Just a summons. He wanted to talk business. He saw the social media buzz, the full house, and now he wanted to talk. The last fragile thread of hope inside me snapped. It was never about me. It was never about my dream. It was about what they could get from it. I stood there in the quiet of my magnificent failure, a success to the world but a ghost to my own family, and I knew that something had to change. The rules of our relationship, rules I had followed my entire life, were about to be rewritten. Staring at my father's text, something inside me didn't just break, it hardened. The grief and hurt from the last few hours began to crystallize into a cold, clear resolve. We need to discuss the restaurant. The audacity of it was breathtaking. They hadn't seen the restaurant, hadn't tasted a single dish, hadn't offered a word of support on the most important night of my professional life, and now he wanted to discuss it. I knew exactly what that meant. It meant he was ready to talk about his cut. He was ready to discuss the family tab, the unspoken expectation that my success would become a resource for them to exploit. They saw a burgeoning success and wanted to claim a piece of it, not through support, but through entitlement. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard. I could have unleashed a torrent of rage. I could have demanded an explanation, asked them how they could be so cruel. But what was the point? Their actions had already spoken louder than any words ever could. Instead, I typed a single, simple sentence that felt like drawing a line in the sand with a sword. Effective immediately, the restaurant is closed to all family. No reservations, no discounts, no exceptions. I hit send without a moment's hesitation. It was a declaration of independence I didn't know I had in me. For a few blissful minutes, there was silence. Then my phone erupted. It was a cacophony of incoming calls and notifications. My mother, my father, my aunt, even Ezra. I watched the screen light up with their names, one after another, and felt nothing but a profound sense of detachment. I declined every call. After 19 missed calls, the buzzing stopped, replaced by a loud, insistent knocking at the back kitchen door. Of course, it was Ezra. I could see his silhouette through the frosted glass. He was the designated ambassador of dysfunction, sent to smooth things over now that their access had been denied. I took a deep breath, opened the door just a crack, and looked at him. He stood there in a tailored blazer that was probably new for his promotion, reeking of expensive cologne and a complete lack of remorse. In his hand, he held a small, cheap-looking cardboard box. He offered it to me with a practiced, charming smile. "Figured you'd want a slice?" he said, his voice casual, as if he'd just popped over after a normal evening. It was a piece of his leftover promotion cake. The sheer, unadulterated nerve of it was almost comical. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stared at him, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. His smile faltered. "Look, Jules," he began, shifting his weight. "We didn't think the opening was that big of a deal. Dad said it was just soft launch vibes, to work out the kinks." Soft launch vibes. They had reduced my life's dream to a practice run. I slowly stepped outside, pulling the heavy kitchen door shut behind me, the click of the lock sounding unnaturally loud in the quiet alley. "You went to his party, Ezra," I said, my voice low and steady, devoid of the hysteria they probably expected. "Not mine. I sent hand-delivered invitations. I texted Mom 3 separate times today. I made her favorite lemon tart, and it sat on the counter for 5 hours before I finally threw it away." He had the grace to look down at the box of cake in his hand, as if noticing its inadequacy for the first time. "People got busy," he mumbled. "No," I corrected him, my voice soft but sharp as a shard of glass. "People got lazy. People got complacent. They thought I would always be there, the reliable backup plan, the one who would just understand and forgive, no matter what." I walked past him toward the large dumpster at the end of the alley, carrying the last trash bag from the night's service. He followed me, his footsteps echoing mine. "Jules, come on, it's not that deep." "It has always been deep," I shot back, spinning to face him. The years of frustration finally bubbled to the surface. "It was deep every time Dad introduced me as the artsy one, while you were the future CEO. It was deep every time Mom compared my culinary passion to your real job in marketing. You all wanted me to stay small, to have a cute little hobby, so you wouldn't have to explain me at your dinner parties. You didn't want a success. You wanted a story." He stood there, speechless for once. I tossed the trash bag into the dumpster with a satisfying thud and walked back toward the door. He scrambled to get in front of me, blocking my way. "Wait," he said, his tone shifting from dismissive to urgent. "I think Dad wants to invest now. He sees the potential. He asked me to talk to you." And there it was, the real agenda. Not guilt, not an apology, not even a shred of genuine support. It was business. The restaurant was a success, and now the family patriarch wanted to buy his way into the narrative to take control. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. "Tell Dad the restaurant is fully funded," I said, my voice dripping with a calm he'd never heard from me before. "And the sole investor bought exclusive rights to my loyalty." Ezra just blinked, the corporate buzzwords failing him. "What does that even mean?" "It means," I said, leaning in just slightly, "that you're late, and I don't do leftovers." I stepped around him, unlocked the door, and walked back inside, locking it firmly behind me. I could hear him standing there for a long moment, breathing heavily, before his footsteps finally receded down the alley. Alone again in my sanctuary, I leaned against the door, the cold metal a comfort against my back. The first boundary had been drawn. The first battle had been won, and I was just getting started. The day after the grand opening, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The lingering sadness had been burned away by the fire of Ezra's visit, leaving behind a steely sense of purpose. My first act of the day wasn't to check inventory or prep for service. It was to call a locksmith. I had the locks changed not only at the restaurant, but also at my apartment. For years, my family had treated my personal spaces as their own. My home was a revolving door for their convenience, a free storage unit, a crash pad, a car rental service. I had always said yes, equating being useful with being loved. But love doesn't stand you up on the biggest night of your life. Love doesn't send a messenger with scraps from a better party. Love shows up. My second act was to make my new policy public. I wrote out a sign on one of my beautiful chalkboard menus, the irony not lost on me, and placed it in the front window of the hearth. The message was polite but firm. "Dear valued customers, due to overwhelming support from our wonderful community, we are transitioning to a reservations-only model for the foreseeable future. Please note that no walk-ins will be accepted, even if we share DNA. Thank you for your understanding." I knew it was provocative. I knew it was a gamble. But it was the truth, and I was done hiding my truth to protect their comfort. I underestimated the power of the internet. By noon, someone had snapped a photo of the sign and posted it on a local foodie blog. By evening, it had gone viral. The story of the chef whose family ditched her opening for her brother's party and her subsequent badass response was everywhere. My phone, which had been buzzing with my family's angry calls, was now lighting up with notifications from strangers. The comment section of every post was a tidal wave of support. This woman is my hero. Boundaries taste better than betrayal. Tell Ezra to eat a slice of humble pie. It turned out my story, my quiet heartbreak, was not unique. It resonated with thousands of people who had felt overlooked, unappreciated, or taken for granted by the very people who were supposed to love them unconditionally. Of course, my family saw things differently. My mother, Cal, led and left a single, seething voicemail. "Juliet, this is childish." Her voice was tight with fury. "We're family. We made a mistake, but this public tantrum you're throwing is making things so much worse. You're embarrassing us." I listened to the message, and for the first time, her words had no power over me. She wasn't upset that she had hurt me. She was upset that I had exposed her. The concern was for her image, not my feelings. I deleted the voicemail without a second thought. That evening, as I was opening the restaurant, a couple from Georgia who were visiting the city walked in, their faces beaming. "We saw you online," the woman said, her eyes sparkling. "We canceled our other reservation just to eat here. We had to support you." As I led them to their table, I caught my reflection in the large front window. I didn't look angry or bitter. I looked free. The restaurant was buzzing with the energy of people who had chosen to be there, and it felt more like home than any family dinner ever had. 2 days later, my father showed up. He didn't come to the restaurant, of course. He wouldn't risk being seen, not with the story gaining traction and local news outlets starting to sniff around. He came to my apartment, a place he hadn't visited in over a year. I saw him through the peephole, looking uncomfortable and out of place in my hallway. His suit was slightly rumpled, his expression tired. He looked like an author who had lost control of his own narrative. "Juliet, open the door," he said, his voice muffled. "Let's be adults about this." I opened the door but blocked the entrance with my body. "You want to talk? We can talk right here." He sighed, a long, exasperated sound. "This is ridiculous. We're not enemies." "No," I agreed calmly. "You're just people who conveniently forgot I existed unless I was cooking the meal or footing the bill." He flinched, a flicker of something, maybe shame, maybe just annoyance at being called out, crossing his face. "I was going to help you," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I was looking into some financing options for expansion." I almost laughed. "You mean you wanted equity?" I countered. "You wanted control over my business, my dream?" His face hardened. "Don't be paranoid, Juliet. I just want what's best for you." I had been waiting for this. I turned, grabbed a large manila envelope from the console table behind me and handed it to him. "Here," I said, "this should clear things up." He opened it, his brow furrowed in confusion. Inside were copies of the restaurant's incorporation documents, the deed to the building, the patents on my signature recipes, and the LLC charter. Everything was solely and irrevocably in my name. He looked up from the papers, stunned. "You got a lawyer?" "I got a team," I replied, feeling a surge of pride. "It's funny what happens when you stop waiting for permission to build your own empire." He stared at the documents, the reality of his lost leverage sinking in. "We just wanted you to succeed," he muttered, the words sounding hollow even to him. "No," I said, the final piece of the puzzle clicking into place. "You wanted me to be dependent, manageable, small." He had no response. As he turned to leave, defeated, he delivered one final parting shot. "This will come back to bite you, Jules. You're burning bridges." I nodded, a sense of calm washing over me. "Then I guess I'll learn to swim." I closed the door on his retreating back, the click of the new lock a satisfying final word. That night, my phone pinged with a text from an unknown number. It was Ezra. "They're planning something, be careful." I wasn't scared. Let them plan. So was I. Ezra's warning was unsettling, but it didn't surprise me. My family, particularly my father, did not handle losing control well. When direct confrontation and emotional manipulation failed, they would inevitably resort to more insidious tactics. I didn't have to wait long. The first attack came 2 days later, not as a knock on my door, but as a poison dart in the digital world. It started with a single one-star Yelp review. "Food was cold," it read. "Staff was incredibly rude." The owner just stared at us the whole time like we didn't belong, a very uncomfortable experience. The username was a generic combination of a name and numbers. I frowned, trying to place the customer. We had a flawless service that night, and I personally check on every table. The complaint felt fabricated. An hour later, 2 more nearly identical reviews appeared on a different platform, then another 3 on Google. Within a few hours, a coordinated barrage of 6 one-star reviews had hit every major review site. They all shared the same vague, damaging language: cold food, rude staff, and unwelcoming owner. The problem, however, was that not a single one of the usernames matched anyone in our reservation system for the past week. We had a meticulous log, and these people simply hadn't. Been there. Furthermore, my kitchen had strict temperature controls. Sending out cold food was practically impossible. This wasn't genuine customer feedback. This was a smear campaign. It was digital vandalism designed to cripple a restaurant's reputation from the shadows, an attack that leaves no fingerprints but plenty of poison. My father's words echoed in my mind: "You're burning bridges." This was him trying to set my new world on fire. My first instinct was a flash of hot, white anger. I wanted to respond to every review, to call them out as liars, to expose the bitter, petty nature of my family to the world. But I took a deep breath and forced myself to think strategically. A public, emotional outburst was exactly what they wanted. They wanted to paint me as unhinged, unprofessional, confirming their narrative that I was the childish one having a tantrum. Panicking was not an option. Preparation was. My first call was to my lawyer. I explained the situation, forwarding her the screenshots of the reviews, the timestamps, and my reservation logs, which proved the reviewers were never customers. She immediately began drafting cease and desist letters to the review platforms, citing defamation and a coordinated harassment campaign. While it was a long shot to get them removed without definitive proof of the perpetrators, it was the first official step in documenting the attack. My second call was to an ally I had cultivated long before this war began. Her name was Catherine, a well-respected journalist for the city's largest local paper. She had been one of the few critics who came to the hearth in its first week, before the viral drama, and had written a glowing review she titled "The Restaurant with a Soul." She appreciated not just the food, but the story behind it. I laid out the evidence for her calmly and rationally: the timing of the reviews, the identical phrasing, the discrepancy with my reservation book, and my brother's cryptic warning. I wasn't just complaining, I was presenting a case. Catherine listened intently, the silence on the other end of the line punctuated by the soft tapping of her keyboard. "I think someone's targeting you, Juliet," she said, her tone serious. "This has all the hallmarks of a deliberate reputation attack. It's vicious." She paused for a moment. "Do you want to go on record with this?" "Yes," I said, without a second of hesitation. "But I don't want it to be a he said, she said story. I want it to be about the facts." We spent the next hour working out the angle. This wouldn't be a story about a family feud. It would be a story about a small business owner fighting back against anonymous online sabotage. It was a bigger, more relatable issue, and my personal drama would simply be the case study. I provided her with everything she needed: authenticated screenshots, a list of real customers from those nights who could provide testimonials, and even a statement from my head server about our service standards. My plan was simple: meet their darkness not with more darkness, but with overwhelming light. While they were hiding behind fake profiles and spewing lies, I would be transparent, professional, and armed with the truth. I also took a proactive step on our own social media. I posted a carefully worded statement: "We've recently been the target of several coordinated, disingenuous reviews." While we take all genuine customer feedback seriously, these posts appear to be a deliberate attempt to mislead our community. To our incredible supporters, thank you for standing with us. The best way to judge the hearth is to come and experience it for yourself. The truth is always on the menu. The post was flooded with positive engagement. People saw the campaign for what it was. Reservations for the upcoming weeks, instead of dwindling, began to fill up even faster. They had meant to isolate me, to scare away my customers and destroy my credibility. Instead, they had galvanized my support base and handed me a platform. As I prepped for dinner service that evening, a strange sense of calm settled over me. They had made their move, a cowardly attack from the shadows. Now it was my turn to respond, and I was going to do it in the bright, unforgiving light of day. The trap was set. All I had to do was wait for the truth to spring it. The article hit the internet at 8 o'clock the next morning. Catherine had worked fast. The headline was powerful and precise. Beneath the apron strings, how a rising star chef is fighting back against family sabotage. It was more direct than I had anticipated, but Catherine had made an editorial choice. She'd found evidence I didn't even know existed. The piece was a masterclass in investigative journalism. It laid out the timeline of my restaurant's opening, the viral sign, and the subsequent flood of suspicious one-star reviews. It included screenshots of the reviews, highlighting the identical, generic phrasing. But then it went a step further. Catherine had quoted several anonymous sources from my parents' social circle who confirmed the family's intense disapproval of my career. The real bombshell, however, was a direct quote from a former employee of my father's business. He stated on the record that my father had once boasted about how he would bring me to my senses, and that if I didn't agree to let him manage the investment, he would make sure the restaurant didn't last the year. The article didn't just suggest sabotage, it painted a clear picture of motive and intent, with my father holding the brush. By noon, the story had been picked up by national outlets. My small, local drama had become a case study in toxic family dynamics and corporate-style bullying. The court of public opinion delivered its verdict swiftly and decisively. The comments were a firestorm of support for me and condemnation for my family. Imagine being so threatened by your own daughter's success. This isn't a family, it's a hostile board of directors. She's not the black sheep, she's the phoenix rising from the ashes of their jealousy. That night, the restaurant was filled with a different kind of energy. It wasn't just diners, it was supporters. A woman walked in, went straight to the hostess stand, and handed her a $1,000 bill. "This is for the chef," she whispered. "Tell her it's a tip for standing up for herself." When my hostess brought the money to me in the kitchen, I had to excuse myself and go into the walk-in fridge. I leaned against the cold metal shelves and cried, not from weakness or sadness, but from overwhelming relief. For my entire life, I had fought my battles alone in silence. Now, the world had seen the truth, and they were choosing to stand with me. The real confrontation, however, didn't happen over the phone or in a public showdown. It came quietly, unexpectedly, after we had closed for the night. I was doing the final accounts in my office when I heard a soft knock at the back door. I assumed it was a delivery driver. When I opened it, I was shocked to see Natalie, Ezra's fiancée, standing there. She looked small and fragile under the harsh alley light, her face pale and her eyes red-rimmed. In her hand, she clutched her phone so tightly her knuckles were white. "Can I talk to you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Please, just for a minute." My first instinct was to say no, to shut the door on anything and anyone associated with Ezra. But there was a desperate sincerity in her eyes, a look of profound guilt that stopped me. I stepped aside and let her in. I led her to the empty dining room and we sat in the corner booth, the very one my family had left empty. She wrapped her hands around the cold coffee cup I'd left on the table, her fingers trembling. "I didn't know," she began, her voice cracking. "I mean, I knew they were upset, but I didn't know how far they were planning to go." I waited, staying silent, letting her find the words. "They created a WhatsApp group," she continued, looking up at me, her eyes filled with shame. "Your mom, Ezra, your Aunt Linda, even your cousin Mark was in it. They called it Project Reset." The name sent a chill down my spine. It sounded like a corporate strategy for a hostile takeover. "The plan," she said, taking a shaky breath, "was to apply enough pressure to force you to either sell the restaurant to your dad for a low price, or to make you fail so you'd have to come back to them, defeated." It was exactly what I had suspected, but hearing it confirmed, hearing the cold, calculated name they'd given their plot, made it feel so much more monstrous. "Ezra told me they were just trying to bring you back to reality," she said with a bitter laugh. "But after the article went viral today, they all turned on each other. Your mom is blaming Ezra for not controlling the narrative. Ezra is blaming your dad for being so obvious. It's absolute chaos. I leaned back in the booth, watching her, processing everything. Natalie, why are you telling me this? She looked down, ashamed. Because they dragged me into it. They expected me to participate, to leave a bad review from a fake account, and because I don't want to marry into a family that would systematically try to destroy one of their own. I don't want to marry a man who would do that to his own sister. With that, she slid her phone across the table. The screen was open to the Project Reset group chat. I stared at it. There it was, in black and white. Messages from my mother. She's getting too full of herself. We need to humble her. From my father, I'll call my contact at her primary food supplier, see if we can pull the plug on her discount. And from Ezra, let's just make her beg to come back into the fold. She'll break eventually. It was all there. The names, the dates, the cold-blooded plans. It was the smoking gun. Natalie cleared her throat. If you want to go public with this, you have my blessing. I'm done with them. I looked at the trove of evidence on her phone, then back at her. Revenge wasn't about making the most noise. It was about making the right move at the right time. This wasn't about getting even anymore. This was about getting free. Thank you, I said, my voice filled with a genuine gratitude that surprised even me. You just gave me everything I needed. And I meant it. Sometimes, the winning card doesn't come from your own hand, but from someone else who is finally ready to fold. I never had to use the screenshots Natalie gave me. She did it herself. The next morning, at precisely 9:12 a.m., she posted a selection of the most damning messages from the Project Reset group chat to her own social media accounts. Her caption was simple, elegant, and devastating. I will not be marrying into this family. This is why. It was an explosion. The story, which had already been simmering, boiled over into a national scandal. News outlets that had been reporting on the anonymous online attacks now had undeniable proof of a conspiracy, complete with the names and faces of the perpetrators. My family's carefully curated image of respectable suburban success was shattered in an instant. The public backlash was immediate and brutal. My father's former company issued a statement distancing themselves from his actions. My mother's charity luncheon was abruptly canceled. Ezra, the golden child, was reportedly put on administrative leave from his marketing job, pending an internal review. They had wanted to control the narrative, and now it was a runaway train they could never hope to stop. For me, the effect was the polar opposite. The hearth became a symbol of resilience. The story of my fight resonated so deeply that reservations became the hottest ticket in town. We were booked solid for the next 6 weeks. A week later, my landlord called me personally. Juliet, he said, his voice warm with admiration, I'm extending your lease for 5 years, and I'm locking in your current rent. You're the pride of this street, and we're not letting you go anywhere. 2 weeks after that, I received an email from the editor of the Food Chronicle, one of the most prestigious culinary magazines in the country. We're doing a feature on 10 chefs who survived the fire, she wrote. We'd like you to be our cover story. You're not just a chef anymore, you're a revolution. I sat in my small office, staring at the word cover, and felt a sense of vindication so profound it almost brought me to my knees. Amidst the chaos and the accolades, my family tried to reach me. Ezra sent a single, pathetic text. I didn't know Mom saved that stuff, I'm sorry. It was a classic non-apology, blaming our mother for getting caught. I deleted it without responding. My mother left a string of tearful voicemails, swinging wildly between blaming me for airing our private business and begging for my forgiveness. I listened to none of them. I was too busy. Too busy prepping for a full dinner service. Too busy tasting a new sauce with my sous chef. Too busy straightening a crooked picture on the wall of my dining room. I was too busy living the life they tried to take from me. Exactly 1 year to the day of the grand opening, an invitation arrived in the mail. It was printed on gold foil with elegant, scripted lettering, sealed with the Vance family crest. It was an invitation to Ezra and his new fiancée Marlene's engagement brunch. They had found someone else willing to join their fractured dynasty. The invitation was a transparent, desperate plea for a photo op, a chance to show the world that their family was healing, that I had forgiven them. They hoped I would post a smiling picture, a signal that their social exile was over. I looked at the invitation, laughed out loud, and dropped it into the blender with my morning smoothie. Then, I opened my laptop and clicked confirm on a deal I had been negotiating for months. It was the lease for a second location. I called it Juliet's Table. It was in a historic brick building in the heart of downtown, with exposed beams, a rooftop garden, and a kitchen twice the size of my first. I made a conscious decision with my hiring. I sought out the overlooked and the underestimated, culinary school graduates with immense talent but no industry connections, single mothers looking for a second chance, quiet dreamers who had been told they weren't good enough. We weren't just a staff, we were a collective. We were building a new table, one where everyone had a seat. On the day of the ribbon cutting for Juliet's Table, a crowd gathered on the sidewalk. Catherine, the journalist who had first shared my story, was there, microphone in hand. "Juliet, the whole city is watching," she said with a smile. "What would you say to your family now if they could hear you?" I looked out at the sea of supportive faces, at the beautiful new restaurant behind me, at the loyal, happy staff, my real family. Standing beside me, I thought of the years of feeling small, the pain of their betrayal, and the long, hard climb to this moment. I smiled, a slow, soft smile that reached my eyes. "Nothing," I said. "I would say nothing at all." Because they never wanted answers, they wanted absolution. They never wanted to understand, they wanted to be forgiven. And I had nothing left to say and nothing left to prove. My success, seasoned with my silence, was the only response they would ever get from me again. Later that evening, a woman walked into the bustling new kitchen alone. She looked nervous. "I saw your story online," she said, her voice quiet. "My daughter wants to be a chef, but she's terrified she won't be good enough, that people will tell her she can't." I stopped what I was doing, wiped my flour-dusted hands on my apron, and handed her a menu. "Tell her this," I said, looking her directly in the eye. "They told me the same thing.